Today we're going to look at how to index data from Doors 9.6 in the Lifecycle Query Engine, or LQE. The first step is to create a user in Doors, and this user is how the Lifecycle Query Engine will get access to the Doors data. LQE functional user is the default name for this user. We set a password, which by default in the documentation is QWERTY6. It can be any password that you like. I've also disabled the check box to allow a user to change the password. I've only done this because if the user does change the password, or if the password is changed, that needs to be updated in the other locations within this demo where we specify that password. It's not necessary to specify an email address or telephone number for this particular user who is only used to access the data. However, you can if you wish. We give this user administrative roles to access the database. All that's really required is that they have access to all of the data that you need to index. The next step is to register LQE as an Oauth consumer of Doors. We do this by specifying LQE functional user, LQE functional user key, the Oauth secret, and repeat the secret. This will create, as you can see, that consumer relationship. The next step after that is to set up the working set. Here we specify the Doors modules which we want to make available to be indexed. I'm specifying 2 modules here within that folder. The last step is to initialize the TRS adapter. TRS, or Tracked Resource Set, keeps an account of all the creation, deletion and modification of attributes in the index, allowing LQE to keep the index up to date. The next step is to modify the Factsfill.xml file, which is the configuration file for Doors Web Access. We make a backup of the file, and then we start to make some changes to the properties. If you use HTTPS, then you set this value to true. I'm not using HTTPS in this demo, so I'll leave it at false. We next set the functional user consumer key, functional consumer secret, the username and the password as we have already defined. The consumer key is LQE functional user key, the consumer secret is QWERTY6, the username is LQE functional user, and the password is QWERTY6. I'm not going to change the TRS page size. I'm leaving the port here at 1528. I'm also not going to change any default Derby settings, although it's possible to do so within the same file. We save that file, and then the next step is to start Doors Web Access. Doors Web Access comprises several processes. There is a Tomcat web server that we can see has been started. There's a Derby database that's running on port 1528 in this example. There is an interop server, which is like a client for Doors, and the broker. In this case I'm only running one interop server, but it is possible to run more. As a quick test to see if the LQE functional user that we created can actually log into Doors Web Access, I'm just going to try that login. It's not absolutely necessary in order to get this to work for LQE, but it's a good test in order to make sure that the user is functioning properly. And we can see here that the user is able to log in and appears in the top right hand corner of the dialog. Doors Web Access has a root services document which contains information for where the tracked resource set exists, and we'll see how to use that now in a moment. Within Lifecycle Query Engine, click on Add Data Source, and then to add a new data source for Doors we select the root services URL. The root services URL is the URL to Doors Web Access /DWA/public/root services, and that document contains information about where to find TRS. We paste that into the root services URL field, and the wizard automatically detects where the TRS feed is. We select that. We'll give DWA to specify that Doors Web Access is the name of this data source. You can call it anything you like. And then we specify the Oauth consumer key and secret that we have already specified earlier in this demonstration. We change the number of threads to 1 for each because Doors Web Access is single-threaded, and then that data source starts to be created and populated within the Lifecycle Query Engine. What's happening here is that the modules which we added to the TRS feed are being processed, and we can see that there are 14 resources which have been added to the index, and it took about 17 seconds The index has now been created, and it will be updated every 60 seconds by default with any changes to those two doors modules that we added to the feed. You can see information about the index by clicking on the status link, and here we can see that this most recent attempt to create this index, there's a spike at the end where the new attributes were added to the index. We can go into a changelog history where you can see that there have been several attempts to create this index with the same name that I've been playing around with for this demo. And also within the data sources we can see that all of our data sources are up to date and what time that happened. The last thing that we need to do is click on Advanced Properties and change the connection timeout and socket timeout to be larger values. We do this in order to prevent unnecessary warning messages. In a later demo, I'll show you how we can use this index to create live views of data across multiple applications. Thank you for watching.